So we've covered the plant-like protists, and so that leaves the other section, or the other side group of Protista, and that's the animal-like protists. And so now you should say, okay, we had the plant-like, then we have this euglena that kind of makes the bridge over, and now we have the animal-like protists. So you should be on the third page of your notes. And at the very top, it says animal-like protists, and they are called protozoans. Protozoans. Okay? Protozoa are the animal-like protists, and they are called protozoa or protozoans. They have some characteristics that are that count for every one of them. One, they are single-celled. They are heterotrophic. You know, like an animal, all animals are heterotrophic. They are predators and parasites. They reproduce by binary fission. So remember, they divide themselves in half. And they also move. They're capable of movement. So let's go ahead and pause the video right here. And under characteristics, I'd like for you to add those 5 characteristics of protozoans or animal-like protists. So where would you find protozoans? You're going to usually find them in freshwater ponds. They're literally full of protozoans. So go ahead and pause the video here and write down that they're found in freshwater ponds. So let's talk about some types of protozoans, okay? Some types. And so the examples that we're going to have. And unfortunately, when I'm recording these videos, it won't let me play the YouTube video. You can copy this down if you want to and go and watch it. This is a Paramecium. And so you could watch this video, or I can play it for you whenever I'm with you again. So, example number one is the Paramecium. Paramecium are unicellular, which means their whole body is made up of one cell. They are heterotrophs. They are covered with cilia, and so if you look really, really close right here on the edge of this Paramecium, you can see the little hairs or shadows of what look like little hairs. And the cilia are constantly moving, feeling out the environment, and even helping these animals eat, or these animal-like protists eat. They're very common in pond water. So go ahead and write down Paramecium for example 1, and then write down these 4 facts about Paramecium. You can pause the video right here. All right, so looking at that Paramecium a little closer, this is, of course, an illustration, but you can see that cilia right here, the little bitty hairs. Remember that they look somewhat like the hairs that are on a bacteria cell. However, remember that those were called pili, and these are called cilia. So please make that distinction in your notes or in your mind. A Paramecium is, again, this is that definition, a type of single-celled eukaryotic organism that's classified as an animal-like protist. But what I'd like for you to do with this slide is to go ahead and define the word cilia. Cilia. Cilia are short hairs that are present in large numbers, and obviously you can see that this thing is covered in them on the outside of the cell. It allows the Paramecium to move fast. They also feel out their environment. If you look at this protist cell, you can see all of the bound organelles in there, and the vacuoles and nucleus and all of those things. So remember, this is going to be more complex than a simple bacteria cell. Go ahead and pause the video and write that definition of cilia. So here's a picture of, or a video of Paramecium swimming, and what they're doing is they're feeding on those tiny little things moving around. Well, what are those little things? They are indeed bacteria. So Paramecia feed on bacteria. So go ahead and write that down on feed on. So go ahead and pause this video. So what do amoebas do? Well, there are different kinds, but one is a brain-eating amoeba. I said that correctly. That is awful. It infects people through their nose. So you don't drink these guys in. So you're not drinking the stagnant water. You're in the water and they go up through your nose. They travel to your brain and destroy the tissue, brain cells. They're found in warm, freshwater stagnant ponds or stagnant ponds, and there is no known cure for this. So not something you really want to get. So when they tell you don't swim or don't get in stagnant water or warm water that's just been kind of sitting there, there are lots of good reasons why not to. Go ahead and pause this video right now and write down how this amoeba eats your brain. This shows you a picture of the typical kind of water you do not want to go swimming in. Do not swim in this water. Their health department will put out public awareness statements and things, and here's one that talks about what your symptoms would be if you actually take this in through your nose. There's no cure, but they say it's 100% preventable. That's because they say don't go in here. That's how you prevent it. You need to, so here are your signs and symptoms. You get a really bad front headache. You're getting nauseous, like you want to throw up, stiff neck. Your altered mental status. You literally start having issues with the way you're thinking. You're going to run some fever. You'll start vomiting. You'll have seizures and eventually go into a coma, and then eventually it kills you. As a matter of fact, if you look right down here, it's 99.9% fatal. So if you see water like this, don't go in it. All right, this is just a visual review. You don't have to write this down in your notes because there's no spot for you to do it. We're just going to remind you that amoebas are unicellular. They do not have a cell wall because they're a protozoan or an animal-like protist. They engulf their food by the phagocytosis, and this was the brain-eating amoeba. Now, protozoans we all have relationships. Everything in the world that's living have relationships with each other. And I'm not talking about, oh, they're my best friend, or oh, that's my girlfriend. Not those kinds of relationships. It's how we respond to other living things around us, okay? Other organisms and how we relate to them. Symbiosis is basically saying, yeah, and it's not this, it's not Spider-Man, the symbiote. It is an interaction between two different organisms living in a close physical area. These can be good interactions or they can be bad interactions. Go ahead and pause the video right here and write down the definition for the word symbiosis. All right, so there's going to be three kinds of symbiosis, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but we're going to go ahead and make sure that you understand this. One is mutualism, two is commensalism, and three is parasitism. Go ahead and pause the video right here and write down those three types underneath, three types of symbiosis, and then we're going to talk about them. So let's talk about mutualism first. Mutualism is, we've got some examples, but mutualism is basically where both of the organisms benefit. They both get something good out of the relationship. And there are two examples of protozoans that work with other living things and have a mutualistic relationship, and that's termites and cows. Animals can't eat wood or grass, okay, because they're made of cellulose. You say, wait a second, I see cows out grazing out in the pasture all the time. Yes, and it's because of this relationship that they can do that. Animals lack the enzymes necessary to break down that cellulose that's in wood or grass. So termites and cows have these protists that live in their stomachs that help them digest that cellulose for them. And so because those protozoans that live in their stomach, they have a place to live. They're given food because the animals are eating, and then they in turn help break down that stuff so that the animals can actually digest it. So what I'd like for you to do is pause the video right now and go ahead and write down those two examples under example 1 and example 2. Protozoans, not protozoans, I'm sorry, that's not number 1, but termites and cows. This is just a picture of a protozoan that lives in the stomach of a cow that allows it to digest that cellulose. It helps to digest that cellulose for the cow. And it's interesting because these right here are bacteria that also help digest the cellulose, okay? You have bacteria that live in your stomach that help you break down things and help you process and digest your food as well. So just because this protist is really ugly and gross, it's really no different than what you have living in your stomach. All right, let's go on to parasitism. We're going to just skip over commensalism because it really doesn't apply with our Protista, the study that we're doing. Just quickly, commensalism is where one person benefits and the other one is not harmed. So if you look at this little guy is getting the benefit of the shade, and this guy isn't bothered or harmed, but he's not really benefiting either. So parasitism is where one organism hurts and harms the other one. There is a host, so this is our host, and this is our parasite, and the host provides food from its body and is harmed in the process. So what is exactly a parasite again? Well, it's where one organism lives in or on another organism, which is called the host, and it gets its food at the expense of the host. It causes harm or disease to the host. Pause the video right here and go ahead and write down the definition on the word parasite. All right, so some very common parasites that you may or may not have heard of before. One is malaria. Malaria is a disease caused by a parasitic protist, but this is not the parasitic protist. This is a mosquito. And what we do is we call mosquitoes vectors. Vectors carry and transmit the parasite. And we'll go into that in just a minute. And I don't have a spot on your notes for you that already has this. So I'm going to want you to pause the video right here and go ahead underneath malaria and write down the word vector. And then go ahead and define that. That is an organism that can carry and transmit the parasite into a human. Go ahead and do that right now. All right, so this picture right here is showing you a mosquito that is biting the human, and it's going to suck the blood. But when they bite, they do inject some of their saliva into the human, and the saliva is carrying this parasite, which then gets into the bloodstream of a human. So when it does, when an infected mosquito that's carrying malaria bites a human, it injects hundreds of these Plasmodium cells into the blood. These Plasmodium cells make their way to the liver where they grow and multiply, and they eventually infect red blood cells. Plasmodium is the name of this Malaria Protist. And these guys are really nasty. They kind of look like balloon hippos or something. So malaria, here this shows you a picture of a malaria cell attaching to a human red blood cell. And you can see it as it breaks through the wall. Malaria, so symptoms of malaria, if you were to go somewhere, and we don't really have them, malaria in the United States, not in any major way, but if you were to travel out, the symptoms that you might have contracted malaria would be this. You'd have a central headache, a systemic fever, muscular fatigue and pain. You're going to hurt for no reason. Back pain. You'll start getting chills and sweating. You'll get this dry cough in your respiratory system, and then your spleen will enlarge, and then you're going to start vomiting and feel really sick. Over 1 million people die every year from malaria. Travelers to countries where this disease are present take preventative drugs, which is a vaccine, prior to the trip. They could even take more during that trip and then even take it again once they come back. Where is malaria? Well, malaria is very concentrated in Africa and in the jungles of the Amazon, and then you have these warm Asian countries and islands that are going to have malaria. So if you're ever planning a trip to any of these places, and can't forget Madagascar down here. If you're planning a trip to any of these places, you would definitely want to get your malaria vaccine. If you can prevent it, why even take the risk? They like it really warm, so that's why it's going to be in the tropical and subtropical areas. And then notice the United States here, nada. All right, this is a link to a malaria video. Unfortunately, it's not going to run with me doing this recording, so I apologize for that. So let's go on to our malaria characteristics. You're going to go ahead and find this in your notes and add these 3 facts. Transmitted by a mosquito. They're in warm tropical climates. Not going to find them in Idaho, that's for sure. And it's caused by a parasitic protist called the Plasmodium. Pause the video and write this down, please. The next parasite that you can find in Idaho and in North America, is called Giardia. Giardia is a nasty, nasty little booger. And it generally attacks hikers a lot, especially hikers that are hiking for long periods of time, and they may have run out of water and they decide to take a drink from water that's in nature. So Giardia looks just like this, and you can see that they've got multiple flagella for movement. And so the water, they'll be swimming in the water, and you drink this water that's contaminated with it, and it leads to some really nasty side effects. It gives you an intestinal infection from drinking contaminated water, and the symptoms include cramps, nausea, and not just diarrhea. I mean, it is like explosive diarrhea. You become dehydrated, you vomit, and actually my husband has actually had this before, and he said it was the worst thing in the world. And you can treat it with antibiotics, but here's the problem. If you're out in the middle of nowhere and you're backpacking on a 2-week backpacking trip, you're not going to be close to antibiotics. And so you're going to have to hope that you get somewhere to get treated before you really feel the brunt of this. Let's go ahead and write in these 4 things under Giardia. And I apologize, I forgot to change the word there. It should be Giardia inside of that bubble. This just shows you where Giardia has occurred. And this was done in 2006, so it's old. But this is greater than or equal to 11 different cases, and this is per 100,000 population. So you can see Idaho is prime for that. You've got Oregon is going to be prime for that. And a lot of your woodsy areas where people are out in waters that are just out there, either stagnant or even flowing. They don't necessarily have to be stagnant waters. It's interesting to me, notice that Texas is very little or none. The southern states are very little or none. Down here, is I believe is that New Mexico or Arizona, very little to none. And over here too, that's just kind of an interesting way how that breaks down. The last thing that we'll talk about as far as protists are slime molds. And we're not going to go into any depth with slime molds, but basically they used to be classified as fungus, as fungi, but slime molds are really not true, and they're not true molds either. They're classified being more related to that amoeba that we talked about. They can live as a single cell, but a lot of times the way you'll see them is in a big mass of cells living together. So slime molds would be those last, that last group. And on your note page, it says they thought they were blank, but aren't. And they thought they were fungus, but not. Because you look at that and that looks kind of like a mold or a mushroom right there. All right, we are done with our extensive notes on protists. You will have a couple of assignments that will go over this and even give you a little chance to read a little more in depth on the characteristics. But this was just a nice overview of protists, and it kind of makes you really afraid of any kind of weird looking water for sure.